Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily update for February 2nd, 2022. Well, it's clear that the war danger has not only not been resolved, but continues to move into an extremely dangerous phase, which was clear from comments made by Russian President Putin yesterday after talking to the Prime Minister of Hungary. He said that the Russian demands for security guarantees was not addressed in the U.S. response or the NATO response. He said in a public statement yesterday, the fundamental Russian concerns were ignored. And he added that they're using Ukraine to sabotage Russia's economic development strategy. Now, I reported this yesterday about the memo from January 25th from the State Department, which said that the U.S. policy will be to have sanctions that will undermine the ability of Russia to improve its economic conditions. This is, as Putin correctly said, this is a threat to the security of the people of Russia. Beyond putting weapons in Ukraine, cutting off access to technology is a threat to the livelihood of millions of Russians. Now, in talking about the Ukraine situation, Putin referred to the fact that the NATO and U.S. comments obviously ignored Ukraine's commitment, as they've stated repeatedly, to use military means to retake Crimea. And he asked if NATO is prepared to accept such adventures. Obviously, if the Ukrainian army were deployed into Crimea, at this point, it would obviously be crushed. And so the idea that somehow NATO would have to come in to defend Ukraine is the point that Putin's making. Why are you making commitments when you know that there are people in the Kiev regime who are unbalanced and who want a confrontation with Russia? Similarly, attacks into the Donbass against the ethnic Russian population there would likely end up in war and chaos. He also pointed out that there are human rights violations by the Ukrainian government against the people in the Donbass, as well as the people who live in the western part of the country. Now, backing up the Western response against Russia was an announcement yesterday by Britain's Foreign Secretary Liz Truss that they will issue new sanctions that, quote, will target anybody that is providing strategic or economic support to the Russian regime, unquote. And the Russians said this is a direct threat to businesses, to Russian businesses, to Western businesses. You can't trade. If you trade with Russia, you will be sanctioned. You add to this the attempt to shut down the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and you see that the attack is not just on Russia, but with any country that might step out of line from the Anglo-American imperial demands of regime change for Russia and China, because ultimately that's what we're talking about. The attempt to make the population in Russia bear the consequences of a Western war drive in the form of collapsing standard of living. Now, what's clear is that the Russians have been able to survive the sanctions so far. They, in fact, are investing in areas of food production, of industry, new technology, trade with China, trade with other countries, and also talking with businesses in Western Europe about trade. So ultimately, this is a doomed strategy, but the doom is not going to be aimed at Russia, but the so-called allies of the U.S. and the British. Now, speaking of attacks on business, you may have noted that there are farm protests throughout Europe. Farmers are very unhappy in much of the United States. There's anger overall at the effects of the increased prices of natural gas in terms of fuel and also fertilizer prices. And these hikes are to some extent related to the Green New Deal, the attempt to wean the economy from fossil fuels, which will have devastating consequences for farmers, not only on farm income, but the ability to produce food. And prices, as you know, are already skyrocketing on food. Now, there's a new report that came from a Dutch university. I think I'm pronouncing it right, Wageningen University, which is a ag and research center. And what they write about is that the European Union plans for drastic cuts in the use of pesticides and fertilizers, as well as in the use of farmland, are part of an EU green policy that will cut agricultural yields and result in food shortages. Now, in the United States, there's something similar called the 30 for 30, a 30% cut in farmland that would be in production. And ultimately, who's going to pay the price? Well, this report says that if you add the effect of yield cuts, as well as the moving to 25% of agricultural production must be organic, this will also cut yields. So what they concluded is that this is going to reduce food production by 10 to 20% in some crops and is up to 30% for other crops, because you already have fuel and fertilizer prices skyrocketing. As the shortages take place as a result of the Green New Deal demands, the prices will go up, and eventually some of the fertilizer plants are shutting down. Already farmers are reporting they can't get access to fertilizer at prices which are affordable for them, which means food prices will go up. Now, what are the effects of that? Well, wealthy people in the wealthy Western European countries will be able to pay the price, but it will have an effect in Eastern Europe. But more importantly, what happens when they have to import food from other countries to replace what's no longer being produced? And this is what has happened in the past when the International Monetary Fund has forced African countries, for example, to export their food in order to make money to pay debt. You add to that there'll be shortages of food production in Europe, and there'll be a net outflow of food from Africa, which will take food off the plates from poorer countries where there are already people starving. And the World Food Program has called attention to this, that there are whole sections of Africa that, because of civil war, because of economic poverty, are having food shortages and starvation. Now, we have just produced a video, the Schiller Institute, Why Are Farmers Not Allowed to Produce Food? And I would urge you to go to the Schiller Institute website and look at this. It's a short video, but it develops a point very clearly. The estimate by some farmers in Germany is that if these EU measures are enforced, they will take food away from up to 400 million people by reducing the productivity of agriculture. So this is a war on populations. Again, it's the Malthusian policy, which says that based on the fake requirements of the phony science of global warming, we're moving to less and less efficient means of energy production and food production, which will reduce the production, increase the cost, and starve people. And the same people doing this are the ones calling for the Great Reset, which is a central banker's financial dictatorship over all economies of the world, undermining economic sovereignty. And they're the same people who are demanding that the Russians stop moving troops around inside Russia and insisting that it's the Russians who are about to invade, even as the Ukrainian government is denying that. So if you think the world's turned upside down by the insanity from the West, you're right. What do we have to do about it? Join with us. We have some programs coming up that will be addressing these things. In the meantime, every day on our website, at theschillerinstitute.com, we have new posts that address these crises. So join us, share our videos, and make sure that we defeat the war party before they starve humanity or blow us all up. I'll see you again tomorrow.